I'm James Turk. I'm a director of the Gold Money Foundation. I'm here at the Go Ahead Business Summit in Vienna, Austria. And it's my pleasure to be here today with Gregor Hochreiter and the author of Krankes Geld, Kranke Welt, which basically means in English, Sick Money, Sick World. Gregor, it's a pleasure to be with you here today. Can you pronounce your book in German to correct my bad pronunciation?
First of all, thank you very much for having invited me to this interview. The title in German is Krankes Geld, Kranke Welt. I wrote it in 2010, and it's more or less an introduction into the Austrian monetary and business cycle theory with a little an appendix stating that also we have a sick money because the world is sick in a moral sense.
Okay. What do you mean sick in a moral sense? You know, is it the old Lenin dictum that bad money is the way you destroy a society?
Yeah, that's one way if you want that there are certain actors in society who deliberately want to destroy society, but I also think it's an overemphasis of the entire society on monetary issues. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist, he wrote that if you don't have an inner meaning in your life, that basically you try to compensate that by striving for more and more money. And more money means, of course, money in a nominal sense. So you're striving for quantity instead of for quality. And I think this is something we can see in many aspects of our society, not only monetary issues.
What about in terms of the broader sense, in terms of the Austrian economics? Is that a basic tenet of the Austrian school of thinking?
Yeah, the Austrian school actually stresses very much that institutions have an influence on everyday behavior. So they would more or less argue that because our monetary system is sick in a sense that it's highly inflationary, that it provides an excessive credits, that this leads, for example, to a short-sightedness in all areas of society. So that means the households are consuming way too much, politicians are striving just for success at the next elections, and that businesses also, they grow way too quickly. Instead of using their own equity, they are taking credit in order to finance their expansion. But the Austrians put the emphasis on the institution. So saying that it's because central banks are inflating way too much, this is an effect on our everyday behavior.
Yeah, I see what you mean by having a sickness on the whole world in terms of things getting out of whack from the ways people would normally think and react in society when interacting with one another, which of course is a basic tenet of Austrian economics, that people strive in life to improve their situation, and they do that by voluntary cooperation in the marketplace, so that when, or what Adam Smith called the invisible hand, when you're providing goods and services and someone else is purchasing those goods and services, both of you are improving your situation, which is, I guess, the essential nature of the capital society in which we live. But what is it that makes sick money?
Yeah,
inflation is a sign. Yeah. That's not really the cause, right?
First of all, yeah, there's an issue on the definitions. I'm very strict on that, and I use inflation in German only as indicating an increase in the money supply, or an increase in the unpacked money supply. So that because of inflation, we have an increase in the price level. So basically, that's the terminology I'm using. So in that sense, the main problem nowadays is inflation, meaning that the central banks, or the banking system as a whole, consisting of the central bank and the commercial banks, that they inflate the money supply. And for example, this leads to the effect that hardworking and saving people or companies are driven out systematically by those who finance their expansion on credit, because of course they can always pay higher prices than those who just draw on their savings.
Okay, understood. How do you go about getting rid of sick money and going to sound money?
Yeah, I think that was one of the very tough things. How to end a book? You know, it's easy to start writing a book, but what is the final accord on which you want to end? And I realized that, you know, if I had the power for one day and could push the red button and have at least a healthy monetary system which would be non-inflationary, but if people don't change, you would have the same mess 2 days afterwards again. So I think in the long run, we also need to have a change in our personal attitude towards life, which brings me again back to these moral issues. Because why aren't there any politicians who get elected for at least realizing a balanced budget? It's also because there's no electorate demanding it, or a very small electorate. So I think in the long run, we need to take into consideration that our institutions reflect what people think, what people want. But technically speaking, it wouldn't be so difficult. It's first of all to prevent commercial banks from fractional reserve banking, which means that any demand deposit has to be backed by 100% by banknotes. And when we come to monetary production, also the central banks, if there are any, they should not be allowed to inflate, to print more money than they have gold or silver in their vaults.